Hi guys, it's Rehan. So I wanted to make a video because I have lots of times used Google Forms as a super quick way to collect behavioral data for students. And I think it would be helpful for other teachers and case managers and whatever to see how I do it. So I'm going to give you a quick example of how that works. And like I said, this is just gonna kind of be like an overview. It's not going to be very in-depth. Oh, dang it, I missed it. Well, yeah. Not going to be very in-depth. So if you have specific questions or specific needs, you can send me an email or a message or leave a comment and I will try to help you. So obviously you got to start in Google Drive. If you don't have a Gmail account, you're going to have to get one. Sorry. Go to Google Forms. And then I usually name them based on the student. Oh my gosh, leave me alone. Okay. I usually name them based on the student, but I usually use initials. So I'm just going to pick random initials and I'll do it as if we're going to do a behavior intervention. You can add a description if you want. Also, you'll see the form, like it doesn't update the title, but if you click on it, it's going to automatically fill with whatever you put here. You can also change that though if you don't want those things to match. So first thing you got to do is create the form. And like I said, I love this because you can make it super specific for your student. So think about what is the behavior or the behaviors you want to track. Think about, is it like frequency? Is it duration? Is it latency? Whatever like specific thing about the behavior you're trying to track, and you can make the form specifically for that student, and it only takes like 2 minutes to make a form. So you can just click on the first place where it says untitled question and type in whatever you want. Usually what I do as my first question is just like, what class? And I usually will make this a drop down. And then as my options, I put in the student's class schedule. So social studies, and then lit and art and gym, and you can just keep going however many you want. It's always going to have this like add option thing at the end, but when you like do the form, that's not going to show up. So just ignore that for now. And then add your next question. Oh, also, especially if you're in like elementary school, it might, instead of doing like what class, it might be better to just do like the setting in general, and you can list things like calendar time or like math, what do they call it, like math centers or whatever. Like that might be easier because I know a lot of elementary schools don't do so much like this is math and this is reading and this is whatever. So you can change that one too if you want. And then, like I said, go ahead and put your first question in. It can be something super simple, just like a yes or no, like did TH get out of his seat without permission? And then you can just make it a yes or no. The cool thing about forms too is it tries to kind of predict what kind of question you're doing and answers. So like in this case, you can just hit the suggestions for yes and no, but you could also like click and type if you wanted. I don't actually want a maybe, so I can just hit this and it'll go away. And I have my yes and no. And then maybe once you have that information, you want more information about it, like or you could do something like how many times did TH get out of his seat without permission. Oh my gosh, why do I keep putting an H there? And in this case, you can do like specific numbers, you can do a range. Again, kind of depends on the student. I would always make sure if you're going to do something with frequency, you have 0 as an option. But you can see too, like it already gave me some examples. But let's say we want to do a range instead. So we could say 1 to 3 times, and then 4 to 6 times, and then 6 to 10 times, or whatever. However you want to do it is fine. Something you might want to do also is change the type of questions. Both of those I kept as multiple choice, but maybe you want to do something like behaviors during class. Oh my gosh, can't spell anything. And then out of seat, maybe hitting or inappropriate language or whatever. But maybe you want it to be where you can do multiple answers. You can just hit check boxes, and then it'll change it so that whoever's filling out the form can do multiple things at once. I almost always like to have a short answer option. It wouldn't make so much for here, but maybe like explain, and maybe because you can, if you want to change the order of the answers, you can drag and drop. So you just click and move it. So maybe you'd put it here. So how many times did he get out of the seat? Maybe if it was a really high number, the teacher would want to explain like what was going on. Like, was it once over and over again? Was it for different reasons? Was it because, you know? So I like to usually do short answer things, but you want to make sure it's paired with a question where it makes sense to have an explanation. You also could just at the end do something where it's like, oh, just extra notes or extra things, you know, because sometimes the teacher will be like, oh, even though his numbers were really high, like the data doesn't show it, but he actually had a really good day, or he was really involved in the lesson, or like sometimes it's good to just have like a extra notes area. In terms of the other questions, like I said, I usually do drop down for the class period. I usually do a short answer, multiple choice, and check boxes. These other ones I really don't use very often. Date and time could be helpful if like this would be more, I would say, for like disciplinary things. Like if you need a specific date and time that something happened and that's what you're trying to track, those would be good to include. But I don't usually use those because I usually use these forms more as just like a quick and easy data collection that I can send to all of the teachers that a student has. But you can use it if you want. And if you add a question and then realize you don't want it anymore, just hit the little trash can and it will go away. So now that we have our form, you're going to want to share it with the other teachers, or, you know, school psychologist, or whoever, like speech pathologist, whatever adults the student interacts with. So you're going to hit send. And you can send it a couple different ways. You can send it through an email straight from here, like you just type in the email addresses of the adults right here, or you can get a link and then do it through like an email or a text or whatever if you prefer that. It's usually good to include a little message, especially if the people you're working with have never done a form like this before. You can just explain like, hey, after every class, if you could just fill out this quick 10-second form about how the student did, it would really help us with tracking the data for his behavior. Include form in email. This I like to check off All this means is that, oh, actually, just kidding. I'm thinking of the wrong thing. This, if you check this off, it just means like in the email, it will have the form embedded in it. I honestly don't prefer that. I prefer it to just be a link and then they click on it. And the reason why I prefer that is it makes it, in my opinion, easier for them to find when they have to fill it out the next day and the next day and the next day. Usually if the form is like in the email, I've found that people I've worked with have had a hard time finding it again. Add collaborators. If you do this, it will let you add people to it. The tricky part about this is it like lets people edit the form. So you would only want to do this if it's someone that you're like collaborating with on what should be in the form, not people that you're just trying to collect data from. And most people that have never used this form before or forms before gets really confused by this. So I would suggest not doing that, because what usually happens if you make them an editor or a collaborator is this is what will come up when they get an email, like this screen. So then they don't know, like they'll try to click on lit and they're like, oh, it won't let me click it. So then they'll like type something, or they'll delete the other options, or do something like they'll change the form instead of submitting data for the form. So like I said, I try to avoid doing collaborators unless you like have a specific reason to do that. So now, if we go to this button, the little eyeball that says preview, this is going to show you what they will see when you send the form to them. So you can see it looks a little bit different. You can see the first question is what class. I'm going to fill this out a couple of times just so that we can get some data so I can show you what that looks like. So let's say we're social studies and he didn't get out of his seat and it was 0 times and he had a great day and he did do inappropriate language though. Right now I have the settings so that this will show up, submit another response. I'll show you how to make sure your form is set up like that. But so what I like to do is, like, if I'm filling out a form for a student and I'm going to have to do it every day or every class period, I'll bookmark it, right? So you click the little thing and it bookmarks it. That way you can keep pulling it up and you don't have to like go back through your emails and search for the email to get to the form again. So anyway, we'll submit another one so we can have at least 2 data points. This one we'll say is gym class. We'll say he did get out of his seat, although I don't know why you'd have a seat in gym class. Did it 3 times. Got out of seat twice during presentation to talk to another student. And he was out of seat, and that's it. And submit. So like I said, that's when you send this to other people, this is what they're going to see, unless you've added them as a collaborator, which hopefully you won't do that unless you need to. So now if we go back to what we were seeing, our editing screen, you can see now up here where it says responses, there's a little 2 there. That's because there are 2 responses we just submitted. So you click on that and automatically it's going to show you a summary of the data. This is really helpful for like baseline behavior tracking. If you have a student that you think needs an intervention or you think needs added services or added supports or whatever, this is super easy for any teacher to do, right? And like I said, you know, it took a few minutes to set up the form and a few like seconds to fill it out. So it's super, super easy. This is not super helpful unless you're, you know, trying to see if like one of the teachers is forgetting all the time. But So I'm gonna move past that. This is showing the percentage of out of seat. So this is a super helpful one if you're trying to track this behavior. You can see like, oh, he's not doing so hot. Half of the time he's out of his seat. And this is obviously, of course, if you had more than 2 responses. And then this is showing you how much or what percentage is each frequency. Oh, one thing to note, you might make a form and send it and people start filling it out and then they realize that you're like missing some information. Like with this question, maybe a teacher had a day where the student was out of his seat 15 times, right? And you just, when you were making that form, you didn't think about that. It's really easy to then go back to the questions and then just edit the response. Like you can just add another one that says, oh, 11 plus. And then once you do that, it will automatically change it on everyone's sheet. You don't have to resend it. You don't have to like reprint or do anything crazy. It just will automatically update for you, which is so helpful. And then you see, now it's showing right there that we added 11 plus. The only thing is obviously like if you've been data tracking for like, I don't know, 2 months, and then all of a sudden you add another option or another question, obviously those first 2 months worth of data won't have that information, but it still is pretty convenient and pretty helpful, I would say. And then here you can see the written responses that teachers had. And this chart isn't my favorite, but it does show like, okay, there was 1 response for out of seat, and that was out of 50% of the responses. So this percentage does kind of help, but to be honest, this is not my favorite. You can also look at specific questions at a time. So like this one, I have it just looking at what class, so you can see there was 1 response for social studies, 1 response for gym, but you can also, you know, pick whatever question you want to look at and it will show you the different responses. This view usually gets very overwhelming very quickly, right? Because if a student has like 6 classes a day and if each teacher is doing it, then, you know, after a week, you already got like a bunch of responses. So to me, this view is not particularly helpful. This one though can be helpful, the individual. This will pick like 1 specific teacher's response for 1 specific day. So you could see like on this one, this is the social studies response that I put in, and you'll see all of those things. So this can be helpful if like you notice a pattern and it's like, oh, it's always social studies that these things are happening. You can click on the specific social studies responses and see what happened in that day. And then to look at the next one, you just hit the little button and it'll show, okay, this is the gym response. And obviously there would be a lot more, you would just keep clicking. You also can export as a spreadsheet. If you do that, you create a new one. And you'll see the different questions are across the top along with a timestamp, and the answers are below that. This could be helpful if you want a different kind of graph, because the graphs on Google Forms aren't my favorite, but they're convenient. So what you could do is make a spreadsheet and then, you know, like pick one particular question and then make your own chart off of that. I'll probably do a video about how to do that later. And okay, so the other thing, like I said, now you can go back and forth between questions and responses. You can edit it here if you want. If you want to fill out the form yourself, you got to hit the preview button and open it and then do it that way. The other thing I want to show you guys, if you hit the little cog for settings, I actually usually like to have this clicked to collect email responses. What that means is just when the teacher or whoever is filling out the form, it will ask them to input their email address. This can be helpful if like if their specials or extracurricular or whatever, if those things are always changing, it might be easier to go based off the teacher's email address than the course name. So that's why I like to usually include that. Limit to one response. In this setting, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want the teacher to be able to respond each day or each class period, so I would not check that. Edit after submit. If you check that, that just means if they realize they made a mistake, they can go back and change it. In my experience, teachers don't usually do that. It's a really simple form, and the beauty of it being very simple is that they can do it like immediately after class finishes, right? It'll take like 2 seconds. So generally they don't make very many mistakes because it's so fresh in their minds. So usually I don't have that checked just because I feel like I don't usually need to. See summary charts and text responses. If you check that, that means the teachers will be able to see like the results. And generally I say that's a bad idea, actually. I say that's kind of infringing a little bit on the child's privacy, right? Like whoever the case manager is or whoever is in charge of collecting this data, it's good for them to know what like the student's overall performance is, but every teacher doesn't have to know everything that this child ever did wrong. So generally I keep that unchecked. Presentation, a progress bar, I don't ever use that because like I said, I try to keep these forms really short, really fast. That way teachers are more likely to use them. Shuffling question order in this case is just going to make stuff confusing, right? It's usually easiest if it's the same order every time, especially if you have questions where you have like explanations about stuff afterwards. You don't want those to get shuffled. Show link to submit another response. That's when I showed you on the form after we submitted it, that little link that was like submit another one. That is why that appeared. So if you didn't want that to appear for some reason, you could uncheck that. You can change the confirmation message if you want it to be, you know, less general. And then this quizzes thing, I don't use any of this stuff for behavior like data collection. I don't find any of it really useful. I'll probably do a different video on making quizzes on Google Forms, but I don't find that helpful for this like particular reason. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, oh, and you see, since I added the email address thing, it automatically like added this question into it where people have to submit their email addresses. Anyways, I feel like that's a pretty good, pretty fast overview. Like I said, I didn't go into very many specifics. I just wanted it to be usable for you guys. So if you have any questions, if you run into any problems, please send me an email, leave me a comment, any of that stuff. And hopefully this helps you guys to be able to like quickly and easily track some data, because I know that can be super difficult. And let me know how it goes.